Hi, this is Bryan Christensen, and the title of our paper is Does Hip Contracture Affect Anterior Pelvic Tilt Changes During Squatting? So we use a modified Thomas test in this study, which is a special test that's commonly used by athletic trainers, and it's used to assess hip flexion contracture. And with hip flexion contracture, we're talking about iliopsoas and or rectus femoris as being in a contracted state. We also use a squat in this study, which is a common resistance train exercise that involves some hip flexion, but sometimes it's done incorrectly and sometimes can lead to poor performance and possible injury. So even though the Thomas test, modified Thomas test, is used by athletic trainers a lot, we didn't really find any research that looked at, if you get a positive or negative with a modified Thomas test, does it really matter when you're actually doing some kind of athletic performance or some motor skill? So the purpose of our study was to examine the possible effects of hip flexure contractures on changes in pelvic anterior tilt during the squat. And we hypothesized that hip contracture related to iliopsoas and rectus femoris would result in more anterior pelvic tilt during the squat. So we had 20 subjects, 10 males and 10 females. They were recreationally active. All of them had been doing the back squat at least once a week and their workouts for the past 6 months, so they were at least fairly experienced in squatting. We used a number of reflective markers. This study was part of a larger study, so we didn't use all these for this particular study, but this was all the markers that we had on the subjects during these studies. So what we did was had the subjects complete a modified Thomas test 3 different times while they were being observed by a athletic trainer. We randomized the order that the athletic trainers observed the modified Thomas test. So that wasn't the same athletic trainer observing the first one, second one, and third one, and so on. They were randomized. And there wasn't always complete agreement if the subjects were positive or negative. So if at least 2 out of 3 athletic trainers rated them as positive for the iliopsoas and or rectus femoris contracture, we counted them as positive for each test. So here's a couple of videos showing modified Thomas test. You can see the one on the left. She was one of our subjects that was negative for both iliopsoas and rectus femoris. And then the one on the right here, you can see that she was actually positive for both tests. So you can see quite a bit of difference there in their amount of contracture. So after that, we put them through a little bit of a warm up, and then we did a maximum isometric test on a force plate. And we had them do the isometric test when the knees are about 90 degrees. And we use that to estimate a 1RM for the study for the reps we have them go through after this. So you can see some pictures here, kind of how we did it. Basically, we found about a 90-degree position, and then we loaded up the bar with more weight than they could move, and then we tested them for an estimated 1RM for that position. Then we used that estimated 1RM and calculated 80% of those results and had them perform one set of 8 repetitions. So as you can see here, we had a bungee cord across the squat rack so they would know how far to go down, so they matched the level that they were at during the isometric test. And we had a camera at the hip level on all the participants' right side, capturing the motion in sagittal plane. So you can see here, we had them again do one set of 8 reps, and they were structured to go down to the bungee cord. So after we did testing, we did angles were measured with Dartfish motion analysis software, and anterior pelvic tilt was measured in the lowest position of the squat, or when the knees were approximately at 90 degrees. So the same position basically told them go down to, in the same position that we tested them for the estimated 1RM. Unfortunately, we found out through this that our ASIS marker was obscured by the trunk and thigh, in most cases at the bottom of the squat. So we had to kind of use a roundabout method to get that change in anterior pelvic tilt from what it was at the beginning. So we use this process. We measured the posterior pelvic angle and subtracted from 180 to get the anterior pelvic tilt angle. And then we subtracted that from 90 to get the actual change. Anterior pelvic tilt from, the starting position was basically at 90 degrees until the position at the bottom of the squat. So we use some mixed models and ANOVAs to look at difference between positive and negative hip contracture groups for both the iliopsoas and the rectus femoris. We used a p value of less than 0.05. So we found that 8 of the 20 subjects were found to be positive for iliopsoas contracture, and 12 of the 20 subjects were found to be positive for rectus femoris contracture. So you can see the mean change in anterior pelvic tilt angles here. So the non-contracture group had an average of 48.1 degrees, and the contracture group was 47.1. For the rectus femoris, the non-contracture group had a change of 41.9 degrees, and the contracture group was 51.6. So a fair amount of difference there, much more than there was on average anyway with the iliopsoas. However, we ran the ANOVAs, we didn't find any significant differences for the iliopsoas contracture groups. It was a little bit interesting. Again, this was non-significant, but as you can see in this figure here, which is just our anterior tilt change mean in degrees. And so the blue is the non-contracture groups. So the non-contracture groups, again, this wasn't significant, but they had slightly less change. The first 4 reps, and then the last few reps, or actually after repetition 5, so the last couple, they actually had more anterior pelvic tilt changes. So it kind of changed about halfway through. With the rectus femoris contracture groups, again, we didn't find anything significant. However, again, a little bit interesting that, again, here's a similar figure with our anterior tilt means in degrees and our repetitions across the bottom. The blue, again, is our non-contracture groups for those that group people that tested negative for contracture. And so you can see they actually did have less change in anterior pelvic tilt through all 8 repetitions. So we had hypothesized that hip contracture related to the iliopsoas and rectus femoris would result in a more anterior tilt change during the squat. However, we didn't find any significant differences between the contracture and non-contracture groups. And again, although there wasn't significant, there was a pattern for the rectus non-contracture group to have less change in anterior pelvic tilt than the contracture group for all 8 repetitions. So long story short, to kind of get back to what we're getting at, does it matter if an athletic trainer tests a person with a modified Thomas test to see if they have hip contracture? Does it matter really when they go out to do some kind of sporting event or athletic contest or athletic motion? And from what we found, it really doesn't make a difference, at least for the squat. That's what we tested. Thanks for listening. Appreciate that. Goodbye.